a legendary former assassin who is nearsighted but refuses to wear glasses. Under the pressure of his heartless boss, he is forced to take his boss's foolish son on a mission. He intends to show off his pistol skills to intimidate, but the damn sunlight is too blinding. The assassin awkwardly hands the pistol to the boss's foolish son, planning to teach him how to shoot one-on-one. The assassin is completely stunned. This is a person who is shooting for the first time. Feeling embarrassed, he angrily turns to leave. What sparks will arise from these two completely different people? Without further ado, let's begin the story. On an ordinary night in America, the main character, Tommy, receives a new mission. He uses the clue to find a weapon and a scrap of paper in the restroom, which contains information about the target. A man, 6 feet tall, wearing a brown coat, disguised as a horse. After reading the message, Tommy skillfully washes off the ink on the paper and then enters the nightclub to find the target. Tommy's sharp gaze scanned each face, quickly locking onto the assassination target for the night. The mask he wore had a long, twisted mouth. It was definitely him. The person realized he was being followed and ran desperately towards the nightclub's back door. Tommy quickly drew his gun and chased after him. He relentlessly pursued, finally cornering the target. Realizing he couldn't escape, the man immediately turned around and explained that Tommy must have mistaken him for someone else. It turns out that as Tommy had gotten older, his vision wasn't as good as it used to be. The man hurriedly removed his mask and continued explaining, saying he was the cousin of Freddy's wife, the leader of the largest local mafia gang. But Tommy didn't believe him, thinking he was just trying to scare him. In the end, he shot the man's head off. However, when Tommy got closer for a better look, he realized that the man was indeed wearing a donkey mask. It turns out that the target Tommy needed to kill that night was sitting in the farthest corner of the nightclub. And the worst part was that the man he had killed by mistake was indeed Freddy's wife's cousin, and also the leader of the mafia. This time, Tommy had caused a huge mess. He quickly went to find the boss for help. By then, the boss already knew the whole story, his face pale with anger, scolding him for causing such a disaster. The boss angrily warned Tommy that Freddy would not let this go, and sharply reminded him that it was time for him to get his eyes checked. Tommy stubbornly swore that he didn't need glasses, but now, no excuse would work. The organization did not deny Tommy's contributions over the years, but no one could win against time. Tommy needed to know when to let go. At that moment, the order-receiving software suddenly reported a new request, a hit on Tommy with a bounty of £1 million. It was clear that such a reward could only be claimed by the brave. The boss advised him that the best option would be to leave London that very night to save his life. Tommy, thinking simply, decided to leave, but he asked the boss to help him buy some more time. He still had a few things weighing on his mind. The boss agreed to help Tommy extend his time. With that, Tommy quickly went to his ex-wife's house. As soon as his ex-wife saw him, she found him troublesome. She thought that since Tommy had lost his right to visit, he shouldn't be bothering her, but seeing his tired and stubborn expression, she softened for a moment and finally agreed to let him see his son. Tommy sadly told his son that he had done something foolish and needed to leave for a while. The boy casually replied that his mom had said everything his father did was foolish. Although the conversation was a bit hurtful to Tommy's heart, at least it was a formal farewell. After that, Tommy flew to Los Angeles to live. A while later, he started working for his new boss named Harry. One day, while stuck in traffic, Tommy received a call from Harry. Harry ordered him to eliminate an old acquaintance, adding that the target thought they were working together on a mission, so they were completely unguarded. Harry instructed Tommy to deal with it quickly. Though Tommy was somewhat reluctant, he followed the order and picked up his old acquaintance, Erica. The two had once worked together, so Erica wasn't particularly suspicious of Tommy. They chatted about old times along the way. While talking, Erica suddenly warned Tommy to watch out for the branch ahead. However, Tommy ended up driving over it. Thanks to his professional instincts, Erica immediately realized that Tommy was the target today. He didn't show it on his face, but silently drew his gun. Then, he slammed on the handbrake and confronted Tommy right there in the car. The car came to a sudden halt by the roadside. Erica quickly jumped out of the car and ran for his life. Unfortunately for him, Tommy wasn't going to let him get away. The two of them rushed into the forest, one after the other. Eventually, Erica tripped, and Tommy caught up with him, aiming his gun at his temple. Erica was about to plead for mercy, but Tommy remained unmoved. In desperation, he mentioned that he had a young child at home, hoping that since they were both fathers, Tommy might show some mercy. Tommy allowed him to make a final phone call to say goodbye to his son. After hearing the request, Tommy's gaze flickered with hesitation, but in the end, he softened and agreed to let him call. It turned out that Erica wasn't calling his son at all, but was secretly tipping off Freddy. Tommy's movements had been exposed. On the other end of the line, Freddy immediately darkened his face after hearing the phone call. Killing his family member was like a slap in his face, This debt had to be repaid, or how could he maintain his reputation in London? Meanwhile, Harry's foolish son, Julian, was an otaku who loved cosplay, but his personality was incredibly weak. Even when he went out to participate in activities organized by his friends, Julian was bullied by school thugs. Even when someone intervened, by the time he got home, his pants had been intentionally taken by the bullies. Julian still intended to have his father help him get revenge. Looking at his useless son, Harry was speechless. "I've tried to teach you countless times that you need to solve your own problems." Their family had wandered the desert for many years. It was because of their tough and unyielding character that they were chosen by the Egyptians. If Julian couldn't even handle bullies in the world of adolescence, how could he possibly handle the big players when taking over the family business? Therefore, Harry demanded that Julian solve his own problems. Not long after, Tommy completed his mission and drove back to his temporary residence. After calling Harry to report, Harry told him to come to the house to collect his payment. However, Tommy found it hard to stay calm. He was a little afraid that Freddy might really come after him. Later, Tommy went to Harry's house to collect his payment, but Harry advised him to use the money to buy a better car. As he spoke, Harry handed Tommy a stack of letters. They were all letters from his ex-wife. It turned out that his ex-wife had decided to remarry and told Tommy not to send any more dirty money or letters. For the past 5 years, Tommy had been scrimping and saving to send money to his ex-wife, only for her to refuse even a single penny. This harsh truth hit Tommy hard. Harry, standing beside him, advised him to return to London. Tommy said he couldn't easily go back. He had killed the Mafia boss's cousin by mistake, and that man was someone who valued family above all. If Tommy dared to fly back to London, he feared he would be shot dead by the boss's men as soon as he stepped off the plane. So, Tommy asked Harry if he had any connections that could help him return to London to see his son. Harry replied that using connections wasn't easy. It required owing difficult to repay favors. He wasn't a philanthropist, and there was no need to move heaven and earth for one employee. However, if Tommy was willing to help him with something, Harry would agree to help him return to London. At that moment, Julian was hiding in his bedroom watching the Bear movie. Just as he was deeply engrossed in the film, his father suddenly barged into the room without knocking. Although Julian quickly tried to cover the screen, Harry still noticed something unusual. After discovering what his son was watching, he was truly furious. He immediately grabbed the keyboard and smashed the screen, frightening Julian, who quickly ran out of the bedroom. Once he had calmed down, Harry explained the deal to Tommy. Julian needed to become a real man, and real men needed to work. Therefore, Julian would go on the next mission with him. Before Tommy could respond, Harry had already made the decision. He then provided Tommy and his son with the target's information, McCrory. McCrory was once a professional assassin, and Harry described him as a ghost-like figure, never failing, taking on 10 opponents at once, as if it were nothing. Hearing such exaggerated descriptions, Tommy immediately interrupted Harry and said he recognized the person. McCrory had once been one of the top assassins in Europe, but wasn't he mentally unstable a few years ago? At this point, Harry stopped embellishing and explained that a few days ago, McCrory had a breakdown and decided to confess to the police about all his crimes, including several murders he had committed for Harry and his colleagues. Fortunately, due to McCrory's bizarre actions, the police didn't immediately believe his confession. The day before, McCrory's brother had just picked him up from the police station. Harry needed the two of them to kill McCrory without leaving any trace. Additionally, Harry provided another clue to track down the brothers. There was an informant staying at a motel. Harry instructed that once they obtained the information, they should eliminate the informant as well. After detailing the mission, no matter how reluctant Tommy was, he had to bring Julian along. Before leaving, Harry specifically instructed Tommy that his son must be the one to pull the trigger and kill the target. Just as they were about to set off, Tommy told Julian to put the backpack in the trunk, but the trunk was already full, and the lid wouldn't close. At that moment, Julian's goddess appeared to say goodbye to him. Seeing that Julian was about to leave, she asked if Julian planned to miss tomorrow's cosplay meetup. At this moment, Tommy, losing patience, honked the horn repeatedly, urging Julian to hurry. Julian reluctantly said goodbye to his goddess, angrily tossed Tommy's backpack out of the car, then shoved his own backpack in and slammed the trunk shut. Tommy, completely unaware, started the car and drove off. On the road, the relationship between the two, still new, felt distant and awkward. Tommy seemed to dislike Julian, so every small gesture from him annoyed Tommy. The atmosphere in the car became uncomfortable, and Julian tried to initiate a conversation, but Tommy responded with minimal words. Eventually, Tommy parked in a desolate area, intending to give Julian special training on shooting to avoid messing up the mission. However, due to his vision problems, Tommy missed every shot, whereas Julian, with his seemingly ordinary appearance, turned out to be an expert marksman, hitting every target. As night fell, the two drove to the motel Harry had mentioned. Tommy grabbed his bag and walked toward the target's room. Before taking action, he warned Julian that once they entered, he must follow Tommy's lead. Tommy then tricked the target into opening the door. As soon as the door opened, Tommy rushed in and subdued the target. Julian followed suit, aiming his gun at the target. However, since it was Julian's first operation, he acted very clumsily. As soon as he raised his hand, he dropped the magazine. Luckily, Tommy was there to control the situation. Under Tommy's threat, the target hurriedly confessed that McCrory's brother was meeting a Russian buyer tonight and typed the details into Tommy's old phone. Despite the target's honest confession, Tommy had to follow Harry's orders to deal with the informant as well. When he opened his bag, he found not the chainsaw he had prepared earlier, but cosplay clothes. It was then that Tommy realized Julian had thrown out his bag. Just as the two were arguing, the target seized the opportunity to counterattack and knock Tommy down. He then grabbed the gun and forced Julian into the bathroom. In this critical moment, Tommy rushed in, pressed the target's head into the toilet, and ultimately drowned him. Though the process was a bit difficult, fortunately, the mission was successfully completed. The two then buried the target's body. After this mission, their relationship became stronger. They had gained more trust and understanding of each other. After talking for a while, Tommy learned that Julian had been constantly bullied by school thugs, so he decided to teach Julian a deadly trick, to unexpectedly poke the opponent's eyes, leaving them no chance to defend. Tommy explained the details of the technique to Julian, demonstrating as he spoke. After the explanation, Tommy and Julian practiced together. At first, Tommy easily blocked every attack from Julian. Gradually, Tommy let his guard down. As a result, Julian seized the opportunity and landed a successful strike. It turned out that Julian had deliberately acted weak earlier, waiting for Tommy to relax his guard. It seemed that Julian truly had a natural talent for being an assassin. Meanwhile, Freddy had taken the initiative to visit Harry's house, expressing his desire to know Tommy's whereabouts. At first, Harry planned to brush him off, but when Freddy mentioned offering a generous reward, Harry immediately betrayed his subordinate and his own son, turning back to Tommy and Julian. The two of them drove to the location of the deal, as the informant had previously mentioned. Tommy's plan was to disguise himself as a Russian buyer to meet McCrory's brother. To prepare for this, he brought along a locked suitcase. However, it didn't contain money, only a few receipts. Therefore, they needed to act swiftly. Upon arriving at the meeting spot, Mike, McCrory's brother, turned out to be overly cautious. He asked Tommy many questions about Russia. Tommy kept his composure, answering in a stiff English accent, gradually lowering Mike's suspicion, and eventually gaining permission to enter the mobile home for the transaction. However, just before they could find the opportunity to act, the real Russian buyer called his subordinates. The identities of the two were immediately exposed, leading to a chaotic fight. Julian managed to subdue Mike, while Tommy dealt with the remaining henchmen. The two successfully controlled the situation. Tommy then asked about the whereabouts of McCrory. Mike understood that they wanted to kill his brother, so he quickly explained that his brother had lost his mind and would no longer pose any threat to anyone. He claimed that his brother's strange behavior at the police station was due to fear of going to hell for the murders he had committed, but now, he had gotten over it, and such things wouldn't happen again. However, Tommy wasn't easily convinced. He demanded to meet McCrory. If Mike wasn't lying, he would let the two of them leave safely. Of course, this was just a trick from Mike. As a cunning pretender, Mike knew exactly what Tommy was up to. He pretended to agree, and when Tommy let his guard down, Mike seized the chance to rush out and drive away. Tommy immediately chased after him, shooting, but missed every shot. The two could only follow him in their car. Unable to contain himself, Julian asked Tommy if he was nearsighted. Earlier, Tommy had shot accurately at close range, but when the distance increased, the bullet clearly veered off course. However, Tommy stubbornly refused to admit it. He then turned off the car lights and silently followed Mike's car. Meanwhile, Mike was rushing to find his brother, wanting to take him away. As expected, McCrory had a mental breakdown again. At this point, Mike didn't want to argue anymore. He just wanted to get his brother out quickly. So, Mike pointed a gun at the bar attendant, demanding that he return the money for the condoms for his brother. However, Tommy and Julian were already hiding in the back seat, so as soon as Mike got into the car, both of them had guns aimed directly at him. Nevertheless, Mike was no amateur. Upon learning of their mission, he suggested that Tommy take a photo of him and his brother dead, which they would then submit. Afterward, he would quit his career and take his brother into hiding. However, Tommy completely disagreed. Mike then pulled out a bomb, threatening Tommy to hand over his guns and take the photo. If Tommy refused, they would all die together. Before Tommy could respond, Julian, fearing for his life, quickly handed over both pistols. The group then returned to Mike's territory. Mike and his brother smeared blood on their faces, while Julian arranged them for the photo to stage the crime scene. However, after taking the photo, Tommy still felt uneasy. What if, after the photo was sent, they were killed to cover their tracks? Seeing his doubt, Mike quickly assured him that once everything was over, they would part ways. Just then, Julian suddenly went into a frenzy and jabbed his fingers straight into Mike's eyes. The transaction was now completely ruined. Tommy quickly seized McCrory as a hostage to demand his guns back from Mike and quickly retaliated. A fierce gunfight broke out between the two sides, and Julian seized the opportunity to run to one of Mike's henchmen's bodies, throwing Tommy his prescription glasses and telling him to put them on quickly. The situation was critical, and there was no time for Tommy to be stubborn. As soon as he put the glasses on, Tommy's shooting skills immediately returned to their peak. Even at a distance, he hit every target. He then coordinated seamlessly with Julian, successfully blowing up the mobile home and killing both of Mike's brothers, who had been trying to escape. When they found Mike, he was barely alive. McCrory, in the flames, was certainly dead as well. Watching Mike take his last breath, the two of them concluded that the mission was complete and happily drove back. They had no idea that not only was McCrory not dead, but the explosion had also somehow brought him back to his senses. The next day, the two of them drove back to Julian's house, where Harry warmly welcomed them both. Seeing the photo Julian took with the bodies of Mike's two brothers, Harry almost teared up, feeling proud that his son had finally grown up. Afterward, Harry took Tommy aside and gave him a plane ticket to London for that night. Then he went to find his son. For once, Harry didn't hold back his praise for Julian and handed him the family heirloom pistol his grandfather had left behind. Harry told his son that he had just struck a big deal with Freddy as the main partner. Julian just needed to take Tommy to meet Freddy, and Freddy would hand over a batch of weapons to Julian. Clearly, Harry wanted Julian to betray Tommy, but Julian refused his father's arrangement, saying that Tommy was his good friend. However, Harry immediately began to sow discord between Tommy and Julian, telling him that Tommy had just complained to him about how he just wanted to get rid of Julian, the useless one. Tommy even took all the credit for the work. Julian, with his limited discernment, was quickly manipulated by his father and started to believe that Tommy was indeed such a petty person. So Julian agreed with his father. With a complicated mindset, Julian went to find Tommy and ultimately brought him to Freddy. As soon as Tommy got out of the car, he was knocked unconscious by Freddy's henchmen. When he regained consciousness, he found himself back in his shabby house. Tommy finally realized that he had been sold out by Julian and his father. With disappointment in his eyes, Tommy watched as Julian slowly left the room. But at that moment, McCrory also arrived and killed Freddy's henchman. Julian rushed to check the situation when he saw this. Worried about Tommy's safety, Julian grabbed the gun and ran upstairs. By then, McCrory had already killed his way into the house and took one of Freddy's men hostage. Both McCrory and Freddy wanted to kill Tommy for revenge, but they had very different methods. Freddy wanted to shoot him dead directly, while McCrory, due to his religious beliefs, felt that Tommy could only endure the torment after death if he chose to give up. The two of them could not reach a compromise. While the two sides were arguing, Tommy seized the opportunity to subdue Freddy. In the end, Tommy and McCrory fired their guns almost simultaneously. After a brief exchange of gunfire, neither of them was hit, but both hostages were shot dead. Tommy seized the chance to escape through the window. However, just as he was about to flee, Julian returned alone, becoming a hostage for McCrory to threaten Tommy. So, Tommy was just about to drive to the airport to return to London when he received a call from McCrory, demanding that Tommy come to the place where Mike was killed to meet him. If he didn't comply, McCrory would execute Julian on the spot. Despite being betrayed by Julian, Tommy didn't harbor any hatred toward the innocent boy. After hanging up with McCrory, Tommy immediately called Harry to explain the situation and asked him to find a way to save his son. However, Harry was only concerned about the money he had already paid Freddy, completely uninterested in saving Julian. He even said that a real man solves his own problems, which infuriated Tommy. With no other choice, Tommy decided to go alone to rescue Julian. McCrory didn't waste any time and declared that as long as Tommy atoned for killing Mike, he would release Julian. The usual method of atonement was still in place. Tommy pulled out the pistol he had with him, but demanded that McCrory cut Julian's ropes to prevent him from turning on Julian and killing him. Tommy then slowly pointed the gun at his own chest. One shot, and he would quickly stop struggling, then rise up and kill this damn bastard. I know you're wearing a bulletproof vest. McCrory, seeing Tommy trying to outsmart him, immediately aimed the gun at Julian's head and forced him to aim it at his own temple. Tommy had no choice but to comply. Julian quickly urged Tommy not to do anything reckless. Tommy smiled at Julian, telling him that he was neither a good husband nor a good father. He had grown old, and even killing someone was beyond him. If he died, it wouldn't matter. Don't listen to the nonsense your father said about you." After those heartfelt words, Tommy decisively pulled the trigger. But the gun was empty. McCrory was almost driven mad by Tommy's trick and quickly tossed him a bullet. However, the next moment, Julian seized the opportunity and kicked McCrory in the groin, with Tommy following up with a shot. But just when they thought the danger was over, McCrory stood up in a frenzy. The two of them quickly took cover behind a car to avoid the gunfire. But hiding wasn't a long-term solution. Tommy suddenly had a brilliant idea and loudly repeated what Mike had said before he died. It turned out that McCrory had been abused by his father. Hearing this, McCrory froze in place. But the next second, Julian drove the car straight into him. McCrory, caught between the two vehicles, had no chance of survival. The danger was finally over. The next day, Tommy and Julian participated in the live-action cosplay event. The two of them worked together to ruthlessly deal with a group of school bullies. Afterward, Tommy returned to London and applied for a job as a martial arts teacher at his son's school. And that's where the story ends. This film isn't about a flashy assassin's tale, but about the struggles of an aging man in his final years. Tommy, once a highly skilled assassin, now suffers from poor eyesight and can't even handle simple tasks. He got into big trouble because of a mistaken killing. But the story isn't just about the regret of a retired assassin. Through the relationship between Tommy and Julian, it delves into the essence of redemption. This film isn't a legend about an assassin, but about the later years of a normal person who will grow old, make mistakes, be betrayed, and still manage to find a meaningful way of living, as long as they have loved ones to care for and are willing to help others. The value of a movie lies in its reputation, while the value of a film review lies in its emotional connection. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching the film. What did you think of the movie today? Please leave your comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.